Good afternoon and welcome to the 2026 ACLU of Illinois Lunch. My name is Yohnka and I am the Director of Communications and Public Policy at the ACLU of Illinois. The two people in the room who like Yohnka. There are more than 1,700 people either in this room or watching us online today. 1,700 people. You know, we are reminded today of the people who aren't with us. As you came in, you saw slides marking some of the champions of the ACLU and civil liberties who we've lost in the last year, and I want to acknowledge them as we begin. Let me just also ask, this is the last bit of audience participation, but by a show of hands, how many of you are attending your first ACLU of Illinois lunch today? Look at that, that's a good representation. You know, in addition to those first-time attendees, we're joined today by several elected officials and staff from the federal, from the state, and from the local level. And let me just say thank you to all of you who are here, all the elected officials who are here. We are also, and I also want to recognize and celebrate our sponsors for today who've made this event possible through their generosity. The amazing group of people that you are here with today include people from ACLU chapters and community groups from across the state, including a watch party that's going on in Urbana right now, hosted by our Champaign County chapter. There are representatives from more than 30 partner groups with whom we've worked to advance civil liberties. There are members of our community activator programs, ACLU members and donors from every corner of the state, cooperating counsel who provide pro bono legal services to the ACLU's cases, and our clients who bravely come forward to challenge government abuses. There are also folks here from the ACLU national staff, from other ACLU affiliates, members of our Next Generation Society, the members of the ACLU of Illinois Board of Directors, led by our board president, Jill Metz, and my colleagues on the ACLU of Illinois staff. And I do want to make a special recognition for the Attorney General of the state of Illinois, Kwame Raoul. Like our Attorney General, each of you have shown a deep commitment to fighting to make sure that when we say we the people, we mean all of us. And all of us includes those who have been in the fight for decades, like our recently retired colleague, KT Sullivan, who worked for the ACLU of Illinois for more than 37 years. But it also means the person who told me earlier that this year they made their first protest sign and headed out to a rally. Today we honor those who stepped up to be part of our work for the very first time, and trailblazers like Barbara Flynn Curry, our former board member, who served as the first female majority leader of in the state of Illinois House. Thank you all for being here. We are honored and happy to begin our program today with a land acknowledgement offered by ACLU of Illinois board member Andrew Johnson, an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation and the executive director of the Native American Chamber of Commerce of Illinois.
OCO. That is hello in Cherokee, so let me hear that from everyone else. OCO? Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and it's about time. and where I want to say that I'm here with other colleagues from our Native American community. We're on the table up here. So we were here first, and you're not going to take that table away from us. So we began our gathering today by acknowledging the people and land upon which we meet. It is the location of the ancestral homelands of the people of the Council of the Three Fires, the Potawatomi, the Ojibwe, and Odawa. It is also the home of the Ho-Chunk, Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankasha, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Sac and Fox, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, and Chickasaw nations. All have a responsibility to recognize our Native nations and to work with them as we move forward. So why do we acknowledge the land? It is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been living and working on this land since time immemorial. What I'd like to do is a short blessing, and within our community, we call it smudging. It's a sacrament. It's very much similar to many of the religious ceremonies that we all do, and I do it with a feather fan. My father gave this to me. And I have an abalone shell with 4 of our medicines in it. That we have sage that offers strength, clarity, and wisdom. We have cedar for purifying and connects us to the spiritual world. We have sweetgrass, which is known as the hair of the Mother Earth and resembles kindness, and tobacco, which is a gift to the Creator and bridges the human and the spiritual. It shows gratitude for the beauty in our life. Now, unfortunately, our fire marshals won't let me light this because in general, we light it. And this burns the smoke rises. And the smoke serves as a messenger to take your prayer up to the Creator. So what I would like to ask is that, if you would like, you can close your eyes, but please think of a prayer to your Creator, to your special being. And what we do is we anoint the person's body with the smoke. And as you say your prayer, the smoke, as we said, serves as a messenger. And it rises and takes those words to the Creator. So I ask, please, to say your prayer, pretend we're closer, and that smoke is anointing your body. It's anointing this room with our good prayers, our good thoughts, how we all work to help every other human being on this earth. So please, say your prayer. Amen. And then remember that we are all connected. We will all work together. We'll make this a better world. Think of us 7 generations out, what we can leave them. Wado.
Thank you, Andrew. You know, this is really truly among my favorite days of the year. It's such a treat for me and for all of us to be part of the ACLU community and to gather in this room. It's affirming to see so many old friends who have been long with us in this struggle, and to get to meet many new people drawn to this event today because of the current threats we're seeing from our federal government. And it's inspiring to feel the energy brought to this room by each one of you, the relentless commitment to defending basic rights and lifting up civil liberties for those most in need. You know, the energy and mutual support of today reminds me of a story from last year. I was on a call with a group of advocates from Peoria. Their city council had just adopted a punitive measure that was targeting people who are unhoused in that community. And the group was trying to figure out how they could push back against something they saw as cruel and inhumane. And after a while, one young woman observed that what she really worried about was police clearing an encampment where people were staying, and the result would be that an individual or a family would lose all of their belongings. She said that she didn't really know what she could do, but she knew that she had a box, and she had a place that she could store it until things got a little bit better. A box and a place to store it. You know, that phrase has come to mind for me over the last year when I see people and organizations finding their place in the fight against autocracy. It's the spirit that runs rampant when neighbors grab whistles, join signal groups, and head out onto the streets to warn, observe, and record the reckless actions of armed, amassed, untrained ICE agents. And you know, it turns out that the guys with guns were actually more afraid of the community members with the whistles and the iPhones. That sense of finding one place has been present at meetings and town halls, whether they were sponsored by the ACLU, by elected officials, or our partners, where people have sought information and direction about how to fight and advocate for their neighbors. All of you showed up in the city of Chicago, across the suburbs, including the back rooms of Max and Benny's in Northbrook, but also in places like the Quad Cities and Effingham and Pontiac and Charleston. The spirit of playing that role has been helped along by our friends at Indivisible, especially Indivisible Chicago, who organized 3 No Kings rallies in the last year that drew hundreds of thousands of people to downtown Chicago. You know, at those rallies, we've seen people in their 70s and 80s who proudly report that they're attending their very first protest. We met parents who are bringing their children to participate in democracy, and we've seen people who volunteered as marshals just because they wanted everybody to be safe. And organizations have also played a role. We see the incredible work of groups like the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, the Resurrection Project, and the National Immigrant Justice Center, providing critical knowledge and information that allowed families and individuals to advocate for themselves. The sense of community is not new for many of us. If I can be personal for just one moment, I grew up in a little town that's about an hour away from where I'm standing. It was a place where when I was a child, there were 750 residents. I saw community come together in a time of need in that place. I watched people share furniture and a place to stay for the survivors of a fire, and farmers go out and bring in crops for a neighbor who was sick and in the hospital. That same sense of community is alive and well in this room. And to be honest, it fills me with so much hope. It makes me know that together we can push back the darkness and find our way to the light. Together we can achieve the kind of society we want. I know you believe that too, and we are so proud to stand in partnership with you. Now, of course, some of you may also be here to hear our incredible guest speaker. Melissa Murray is the Frederick and Grace Stokes Professor of Law at New York University School of Law and the faculty director of the Birnbaum Women's Leadership Network. A leading constitutional scholar, Professor Murray also is a fierce advocate for reproductive rights, freedom, and equality. Her advocacy has included authoring strong scholarly law review articles, biting public opinion pieces, and even testifying before the United States Senate in opposition to the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court of the United States. But Professor Murray also uses her wit, her insight, and really remarkable communication skills to demystify our justice system and the Supreme Court. She serves as a legal analyst for MS Now, and along with two other legal scholars, she co-hosts the incredibly popular, and if I can just say remarkably entertaining, podcast Strict Scrutiny. Next month, her latest book is set for release. The U.S. Constitution, a comprehensive and annotated guide for the modern reader, provides historical perspective and context for our Constitution and its application for the current world. It is a real honor to welcome Professor Melissa Murray back to Chicago and to this stage. Thank you, Melissa. And by the way, thank you for catching me when I trip standing up. So you've heard about the important and critical role that the courts play and litigation plays in resisting autocracy. To highlight that point, it's a pleasure to introduce the legal director of the ACLU of Illinois, Kevin Fee. Kevin oversees the ACLU of Illinois' legal strategy and litigation docket and has led a variety of federal and state constitutional litigation at the ACLU, including First Amendment work, criminal justice, and juvenile correction matters, and that just covers 1 year. Please welcome Kevin Fee.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin. It's great to see all your faces. I'm with Ed. I love this event. I've always loved this event. It's been circled on my calendar since well before I was at the ACLU. It's just so wonderful to be in community with all of these like-minded folks. I always just feel such a palpable energy from this room. And it's great to be together. It's sort of like the antidote to doom scrolling. Being together here is something that I've looked forward to for a long time. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much to Melissa Murray. Boy, what a tough act to follow. Enormous fan of the podcast, embarrassingly so. I listen to it to every episode. So just to follow up on a theme, it's true that sometimes, well, all the time, June has felt like bad decision season at the Supreme Court of the United States, although we're very hopeful that the tenor could change a little bit this year with the stellar argument from our own Cecilia Wang in the birthright citizenship case. Lots of fans of Cecilia's work here. That's fantastic. But what I want to talk about today is a little different, and that's good decision season. Right? Good decision season. And that's something that I think escapes attention far too often, because the reality is it has been good decision season in many ways across the country for the better part of a year in the lower courts of the United States, and especially so for the ACLU. Now remember, there's one Supreme Court, right? It hears, say, 60, 70 cases a year. Big cases, obviously, but there are nearly 100 federal district courts across the country. They hear in the order of 350,000 cases every year, and that doesn't even touch the tens of thousands of cases at the state court level. And the fact is, the Supreme Court, as influential as it is, cannot possibly stop all the good that is done and has been done in those lower courts, in those thousands of cases throughout the country. And the ACLU has lived in those courtrooms for the past year. So since Trump was inaugurated in 2025, Right? The ACLU nationwide has taken over 260 legal actions against the Trump administration, and the vast majority of those have been wins. And please, don't believe for one moment that the Trump administration has some magic power to fly above all of these orders, okay? Don't be fooled by the performative lawlessness of this administration. You know, it's sort of ostentatious defiance of a few carefully curated court orders. Now, that's not to minimize the outrageousness of this administration's contempt for the rule of law or its disrespect for the court system. It is outrageous, okay, and it's alarming, no doubt. But remember, they want you to believe that the courts don't matter, right? They want you to believe they can act with impunity. They want you to throw up your hands, right? Don't fall for that. Please, don't fall for it. Because the reality is, this administration is constrained every single day by hundreds of hard-won court orders that form a dome of protection over the rights and liberties of millions. And we're very proud at the ACLU to have been a part of this broad record of victory against this administration. Now, flash back with me to the beginning of 2025, if you will. Sorry, I know it's a time in our lived experience that we probably don't like to dwell on, sort of staring down the reality of a new Trump administration. But as some of you might know, we at the ACLU of Illinois were actually already pretty busy at the beginning of 2025. We had a full slate of civil rights cases, brand new ones, some consent decrees that have been around for decades, right? And of course, never any thought of turning our back on any of our existing clients or communities. So, we had plenty to do, right? But the fire hose of new abuses coming out of this administration was turned on promptly on January 20th, right? And it was not going to be turning off. We knew that. And so we had to react. And so we staffed up. We hired 7 new, highly qualified, accomplished attorneys to add to our already very deep legal bench in our legal department, and we took that incredible team and we went to work, and we won. I have to say, it's been good decision season at the ACLU of Illinois for the better part of a year. We won a court order stopping the administration from blocking funding to the Head Start program. That's right, this administration threatened to gut arguably the most beloved and demonstrably successful federal education program of all time for the sin of paying attention to so-called diversity in educating preschool-age children. Never mind that the statute that created the Head Start program actually requires them to take note of diversity benchmarks. I mean, it's a case that perfectly encapsulates just the sloppy cruelty of this administration. Working with our partners at the National Immigrant Justice Center, we continue to work to secure the release of well over 100 illegally arrested immigrants who were arrested without a warrant by ICE. We were proud to work with the team of lawyers from across the city, the Lovie Law Firm, University of Chicago, Northwestern, First Defense Legal Aid, Protect Democracy, to win court orders forbidding ICE from using tear gas and other violent methods against peaceful protesters, members of the press, and members of the clergy. And just as important, we forced ICE officials to show up in court and answer before a judge for their attack on our communities during their failed occupation of Chicago during Midway Blitz. Then we pivoted from the protests outside the now infamous Broadview ICE Center in the western suburbs to the horrors that were unfolding inside its walls. We worked alongside our colleagues at MacArthur Justice Center and Eimer Stahl to win a court order forcing ICE to stop disappearing hundreds of immigrants into a tiny office building for days at a time, coercing them into signing voluntary departure forms, denying them adequate access to their lawyers or even food, water, or basic medical care. And because of the court's order, Broadview, which had operated as a black box, sealed off from view from the outside world, even from members of Congress, Broadview was opened up to the sunlight of scrutiny for the first time. In fact, it's now subject to our weekly visits and inspections. We're going tomorrow. And while there's plenty of work to be done at Broadview, we're happy to report that where hundreds of people once slept shoulder to shoulder on cold concrete floors for days at a time next to shared toilets in deplorable conditions, that facility may now only see a handful of people come through for short-term processing on a single day. And these are just a few highlights. There are many others that it frankly kills me to have to cut from this speech for length and not give their proper due, because my team has been at work literally nonstop for the past year, and we're so proud of them. And but you know, we can't stop, right? We don't have a choice, especially not now. We can't rest, because 24 weeks from today, Americans across the country will head to the polls to vote in the 2026 midterm elections. Right? This is our chance to exercise what may be our most central right of all, right? The right to pick leaders who will protect our rights and liberties and determine the future path of this country. And that's exactly why this administration is attacking that election with all that it has. Trump is obeying the first impulse of the autocrat, right? Control the election, control who votes, control whose voices are heard, and the rest just falls into place. That's where we are, folks. It's happening here. I can't believe it either, but that's where we are. And so this is where I make the shameless plug, right? This is where I shift into plug mode, and it's something for which I actually have zero shame, because I truly believe in what we're doing here, and I can guarantee you that your direct support of the ACLU of Illinois will go straight toward expanding that great team I talked about and toward expanding that record of accomplishment we are so proud of. And there's never been, thank you. And there's never been a more impactful moment, right, to lend your support. We have to stand together to ensure free and fair elections in 2026 and beyond. And the ACLU is committed to that fight. So I'd like to ask each person in this room to make a financial contribution to this fight if you're able. I see you all stealing my thunder and grabbing the big yellow envelopes on your tables. If you could designate one person to open that up. Spoiler alert, that's where the donation forms are. It's filled with several blue envelopes to pass around the table. There should be one for everyone in the room. And I'm thrilled to share that a very generous anonymous donor has agreed to match the first $100,000 raised in this room and online for our election protection work. So that matches dollar for dollar. Every dollar is doubled. If you want to make a donation on your phone, by the way, rather than the old-fashioned way, there are QR codes on all the screens and on the envelopes at your tables. If you're joining us online, there's a link in the video description. You can click that and make your gift. And again, every dollar matched, dollar for dollar. So why does the work to protect voting rights matter now more than ever? It's no secret that our elections are under direct threat in ways that seem unthinkable to us in the modern United States, although, in the broader sweep of history, and geography, they have a sort of grubby familiarity, don't they? To start with, the White House has made passing the so-called SAVE Act its top legislative priority. The SAVE Act is a full-fledged voter suppression measure. Make no mistake, the SAVE Act has nothing to do whatsoever with securing our elections, which have been secure for generations. It has everything to do with controlling the result. I mean, it's right out in the open now. The president and the key Senate sponsor of the SAVE Act have both publicly stated that they need this law passed so that their party can win the midterms. Now, there was a time, you might remember, that you didn't say things like that out loud, right? Like 5 minutes ago. But they're not even trying to hide their motivation anymore. I mean, the mask hasn't slipped, folks. The mask is off. The mask is gone. It's melted down. There's no mystery, right? There's no debate about this issue, frankly. All that's left to do is fight. And I wish I could say the SAVE Act was the end of this administration's anti-democracy agenda, but it is not. The president has issued executive orders purporting to cut voting rights, including access to mail-in ballots that millions of Americans have relied upon for a generation. In case the 2020 election didn't make it clear enough that we're dealing with bad faith actors, Trump's DOJ is still seizing ballots from that election to sow confusion and doubt in our election system to provide cover for the administration's power grab. Trump's DOJ is seeking the private voter information of every voter in this room, every voter in Illinois, in an action that we have already challenged in court at the ACLU of Illinois. He's also seeking every voter in every state to build a massive voter suppression database that they will use in service of their publicly stated goal of nationalizing the elections. And the acting Attorney General, not to mention the acting head of DHS, have both expressed support for sending untrained ICE agents, the same ones brought to you by Midway Blitz, to the polls in November. But the ACLU is ready to fight back. If ICE agents show up at the polls in November, we will respond in court. If the government attempts to seize more ballots or voter information from Illinoisans, we will see them in court again. We will do everything in our power to protect the sacred right to vote in Illinois. And so if you've already made your gift, thank you so much. This all goes straight to our election protection work, which we're actively working on right now. If you have not, please consider making a gift in any amount. It all helps. And most of all, thank you all for being here today, and for everything that so many of you in the room do every day to fight for the rights and liberties of Illinoisans. I said I've always loved this event, and I do. I mean, the energy is unmatched, and there's always that sort of obvious moment when that kind of potential energy that builds up in the room becomes kinetic energy, when we all stand up and file out of this hotel into the streets of Chicago and filter out back into the city. What do you say we harness that energy today on this great spring day and go on to do great things together this year? Thank you so much for your support today. It means everything to us.
So just as a reminder, if you finished, you're supposed to put the small blue envelopes, I'm assured, into the large yellow envelopes leave that on your table, and our staff will come around after the event to collect them. Our next speaker truly needs no introduction in this room. Since 2001, Colleen Connell has been the executive director of the ACLU of Illinois. Under her leadership, the organization has grown and expanded not simply in size and budget and staff members, but in its impact all across the state of Illinois. A lawyer who's argued at every court level, including the Supreme Court of the United States, Colleen is widely recognized as a strong voice for reproductive freedom and civil liberties in a wide range of venues all across the state. Colleen Connell.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. Our time together is short, and so I want to focus on 3 pillars of our shared mission to strengthen our democracy: resistance, accountability, and reform. First, resistance. The ACLU continues to resist fiercely Trump's attempt to impose an autocratic dystopia on our country. Nationwide, we have filed more than 260 legal challenges to Trump 2.0. But as proud as I am of the ACLU's litigation, and as grateful as I am to good decision season, particularly for the ACLU of Illinois, litigation alone will not liberate us from this tin-horn tyrant. It is up to us, we the people, to lead the continued resistance. Now I know, and I'm so grateful, many of you protested at Broadview, you marched in No Kings, and you generously fund the ACLU and our partner advocacy organizations. Not only must we continue these efforts, we must find it in ourselves to do more. Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, captured the peaceful actions that must direct our resistance. He called on his fellow Minnesotans to respond not with violence, but with neighboring. He converted the word neighbor from a noun to a verb, and he modeled the peaceful resistance that we must all engage in. Neighboring is not simply concern for those who gather at your table or seek shelter under your roof. Neighboring involves the radical notion that each of us is responsible for confronting harm inflicted on our communities. We saw courageous neighboring here in Illinois and north in Minnesota when people organized rapid response teams to signal the presence of ICE. We saw neighboring when people delivered food to families too fearful to leave their homes. And we saw neighboring when people who are not ICE targets formed protective chains and walked children to school. Our acts of neighboring, however, cannot be limited to immigration enforcement. We must oppose all oppression. It has been said that we must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. So, when our LGBTQ neighbors are under attack, we must be there for them. We must show up, not just at Pride Parade, but on every day before and after. And when women's reproductive rights are under attack, we must resist. We must. And not just because reproductive freedom is essential to our well-being, but because the right to make intimate decisions, including healthcare decisions, secures the fundamental right of each of us, to define our own place in the universe. When people of color and women are derided as DEI hires, we must condemn this bigotry. And we must absolutely repudiate the lie that intellect and accomplishment are reserved for white men. And when the Trump administration or its white nationalist proxies try to whitewash our history, we must resist. We must demand accurate textbooks and truthful history. You see, truth is essential for accountability, our second pillar of strengthening democracy. Protecting the right to vote and the integrity of our elections is essential to accountability. You heard earlier that the money raised today will help underwrite our election protection work. With ACLU colleagues across the country, we will continue to challenge all efforts by Trump to restrict voting, including opposing the SAVE Act. We will work to strengthen state election protection laws, not just in blue states, but in battleground states and even in red states where we can reach common ground to protect the fundamental right to vote. But we all know that protecting the vote is not enough. We must hold elected officials accountable. We must continue to track their votes and their actions and let them hear from us. But we need to do so much more. So much more. We need to develop a real accountability agenda that we insist upon after the 2026 and 2028 elections. We must resist the pressure for false kumbaya moments, and we know those will come from those who turned a blind eye or were complicit in Trump's corruption and cruelty. At a minimum, we must hold accountable those who stole from we the people through the misuse of taxpayer money. We must hold accountable federal agents and officials who violate federal law. We must hold accountable all, including DOJ, who misuse IRS and Social Security databases, our most personal information. We must hold accountable those who weaponize the Department of Justice, turning it into a sword of retribution against Trump's enemies, political and personal. And we must hold accountable those who profited or attempted to profit on stock trades and prediction markets, fueled by insider information about the plans and the timing of Trump's attack on Iran. On the latter point, those who profit from predicting the timing of war are not just trading in dollars. They are trading in human lives. That is unlawful and it is immoral. It must be condemned. Now let's talk for a brief moment about our third pillar, which is reform. When crafting reforms, we need to confront a fundamental problem. Democracy has not worked for many Americans. The Supreme Court has been using the ideological fig leaf of originalism to camouflage a relentless campaign to strip rights and political and economic power from we, the people. And more perniciously, to hand it back to the most powerful and the most wealthy in our society. A recent review of SCOTUS decisions shows us that the Roberts Court has ruled in favor of moneyed interests and against we the people a majority of the time. We have seen this vengeful retrenchment every time that we the people secure an expansion of our rights. We saw it in the antebellum South. We saw it in the Jim Crow era. We saw it in the original Gilded Age. We saw it in the events that led to the market crash in 1929 and the Great Depression. And we have seen it accelerate since the Reagan Revolution of the 1980s. In each of these eras, the moneyed interests perpetuated the myth that their accumulation of power and wealth benefits all of us, and that the powerful know what is good for the rest of us, and that wealth trickles down. This is as wrong today as it was in past eras. Many Americans today do not have $400 to cover a family emergency. Many will go to the grave owing student debt. Instead of trickling down, the wealth continues to be siphoned up. The resulting inequality has made it difficult, if not impossible, for a growing number of Americans to secure housing, education, and medical care. That inequality also gives rise to grievance, and we have seen it manipulated, particularly in the Trump era, to divide Americans based on differences such as race, gender, religion, economic status, or geography, and to divert us from a united defense of the fundamental rights that belong to all of us. So, in addition to an accountability agenda, we need a real reform agenda. We need to strengthen and enforce antitrust laws. We need to strengthen and enforce laws regulating banks and the trading of securities, including meaningful restrictions on insider trading. We need to strengthen and enforce anti-corruption laws. And most importantly, we need to establish that the Oval Office is a sacred place for serious people making serious decisions. The White House and the Oval Office belong to we, the people. They are not for sale. This, as I know you realize, is a historical moment that we must meet with our character and our courage. It is a moment where we must choose between autocracy and freedom, between cowering before bullies or standing with the heroes in leading our resistance, between complicity and demanding accountability and reform. Autocracy is not inevitable, my friends. Together, we will meet this moment because free people committed to their neighbors always defeat their oppressors. Thank you so much for being here and for being part of the fight. It is the fight of our lifetime. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you all for being here. I want to remind you, you can still return the envelopes to the large envelopes on your table. There is an action room across the way where you can speak out on issues and build a protest kit. Thank you, Melissa Murray. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Colleen. And most of all, thank all of you for being here. Have a good afternoon.